folks, Dave here at Thunder Mesa Studio, where I'm getting ready to jump into another build project for the ON18 Bandit Canyon Railway. This week I want to build a water tank that will sit up on the cliffside above the Blackjack Mine and feed water down to the steam boiler there. And as a starting point, I'm going to be using a good old-fashioned mailing tube. You know, they also make pretty good telescopes. I'm going to want it to sit right about here on this little shelf of rockwork. This is known as Robber's Roost on the Bandit Canyon. And I think I want it to be about 10 scale feet tall. So let's see, 10 scale feet, that's going to be 2.5 inches. Just measure all the way around. Now to get a straight cut on this, take a piece of Bristol board, just a strip that I cut, line it up with my pencil marks, and wrap it around. And now that gives me a guide that I can line my razor saw up with. Get a pretty straight cut. I've done a lot of them this way. Works pretty well. There we go. Now I've got this is some fine sandpaper, some 800 grit that's taped down to a piece of glass so it's nice and flat and level. Just to get off any burrs or boogers or irregularities. Now let's take a look at some of the other parts for this project in addition to my mailing tube. I went ahead and laser cut some pieces for this, starting with the tank wrapper. This is some 1/32 of an inch thick basswood, and I just scribed that. Then I've got a deck for the tank to sit on, just like that. And I decided it might be, give it an interesting look, to have a peaked roof. Something you don't see a lot of on water tanks like this. So I designed some roof trusses and a ridge beam. And then what else? Well, I've got some scale lumber here. This is a 6x8, 6x6, 4x6, 4x4, 1x6, and 2x4, and that should cover, I think, everything I need. It might be more than I need. And then for roofing, I have some leftover corrugated material from the Sundance Mining Company project. So I think the first thing I want to do is stain all of this wood, and for that I'm going to use my shoe dye and rubbing alcohol mixture, 70% isopropyl alcohol with just a drop or two of kiwi black shoe dye in it. Makes for a great silvery aged wood stain. This is not going to be a painted structure, so I wanted to, show a lot of weathering. So we're going to have a nice silvery wood tone to it. And I want to get these pieces stained first because if you stain the wood before you glue it, then you don't have to worry about glue blobs and things like that showing up through the stain. Also, it'll give it a chance to dry. And apply stain to both sides because this is going to want to warp. But this time around, I'm going to use that warping to my advantage. Oh, this is still very wet. I'm going to wrap it around the tube here very carefully. I don't want to crack this or split it. Put a rubber band on there. And then when that dries, it should hold that shape of the tank pretty well. I like to cut a lot of this lumber to size before I stain it. That way, it eliminates any waste. I'm using my little mini miter box and fine razor saw. You can get these at micromark.com. And almost all the scale lumber I use comes from Northeastern Scale Lumber. You can go to my website, thundermesa.studio, and under the Model Railroad tab, you'll find useful links. Click on that, and then it'll list most of my suppliers where I get all of this kind of stuff from. Worth checking out. I want to go ahead and stain all of these MDF pieces as well, even though it doesn't take stain as well as the basswood does. I want it to, the coloration to be in the same ballpark. Most of these roof trusses aren't going to show. They're going to be hidden up underneath the roof, but the parts that do show, I want them to match. I think the stain is dry enough on this tank wrapper now. We can take the rubber band off and see how we did. Cool. It's holding the shape pretty well. Use some Tight Bond yellow glue, some wood glue. Put this on. First I need to trim it, I think. I'll brush the yellow glue onto my tube. Get nice even coverage all the way around. Use some clothespins right where those seams meet up. Use our rubber band again in the middle. This is one of those stressful race against times kind of assemblies. There. And then we can just fill in around here with some more clamps. Now, while that dries, I need to make some tank bands for this. I want to have some iron bands. This is an old school water tank from the 19th century, so you would have iron bands most likely rather than cables. And I've got some iron band fasteners. These are white metal castings. These came from Weissman Model Services, and they are about 3/16 of an inch wide. So I'm going to cut some bands, 5 or 6 bands out of this Bristol board, the same width as these, 3/16 of an inch. Now I'm going to paint all of these along with my tank band fasteners with some Rust-Oleum dark brown camo, which is a great color for simulating grimy, rusty old iron. Now I can start assembly on the deck, which the tank is going to sit on. These are some 6x8 joists that I'm gluing in place to support the floorboards, gluing them at a 90-degree angle to the scribed-in boards right there. Put a little weight on that, wait for the glue to dry. And I can also start assembling the roof at this time. I've notched this ridge beam in the top of these roof trusses to make my life a little bit easier. A lot of times on a roof like this, I'll use cardboard, chipboard, or something like that for roof panels. This time, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to use roof slats, which is more accurate for the era, I suppose. This is the age before plywood. And I've got these 1x6s to use as roof slats. This is the way roofing was done back in the day. You'd have slats across here, and then your roofing material, whatever that would be nailed down to these slats. And now I've got these boards to fit on the end, and this is cut from some 1/32 of an inch thick basswood, but I need a like an access through here for the crawl space above the water tank. So a worker or a bandit or whoever can get up in there. So I'm going to cut a few of these boards out just to create an opening right there. That can go right there. There we go. And then on this side, I want a couple of these boards to be just broken or missing. Cut through the scribe and then use my needle nose. Just break that off. Give that a little bit of character. And glue that one on right there. Well, I think my tank should be dry enough to unclamp now. Now I want to add the look of some water stains on the sides of the tank. Water is going to make wood like this a lot darker. For that, I'm using some watercolors. Got some burnt sienna and some cobalt blue mixed together in about equal portions, and I'm applying them with a soft brush, kind of varying the profile a little bit. I've decided that this is the bottom of the tank. Now, I could use the wood stain again for this, but I wanted something that I could really, control the value of, which I can with watercolors. See, I can just go in and wipe it off or add more, smear it with my finger. Pay attention, it would be leaking out the seams in between these boards, so that's where you really want to stain it the darkest. Now I want to add some alkali stains along the top of that water stain we just added. For that, I'm going to use some white chalk, just grating some off with my sandpaper. And I want to paint it on, so I am going to mix this chalk with a little bit of rubbing alcohol. Some 70% isopropyl alcohol till you get kind of a chalky paste like this. Now I want to go right along the top of this edge where the water stain is the darkest and just dab that chalk on there. Now, it doesn't look like much when it first goes on, but when it dries, it's going to be much, much whiter. It's easier to do all this before I put the bands on, and those will get weathered also. Now that that's dry, you can really see it, but the line is way too harsh. So now you want to take your finger, and I'm rubbing pretty hard here. You could use a stiff brush for this too, but I like to use my finger on there. Just kind of rub that out a little bit. Spread that chalk out. Another thing that works is like a pencil eraser. I like how the white gets back there in between the boards. That's a look you want, because that's where that alkali would actually build up. Now I want to go back one last time with the watercolors, strengthen up that darker top edge. What I like to do is dab it on and then take another brush that's clean, dip it in a little water, and pull it straight down like that so it fades down. One of the keys is to not try to work on too large of a section at a time. Just do, 3 or 4 or 5 boards. Now we've got ourselves a leaky old water tank. I've made myself a little template out of illustration board here with a mark for where the bottom of each one of the bands goes. So now I can just put this up against the side of my tank and mark where those bands are going to be. There's going to be 5 of them, I decided. and turn it about a quarter turn. Mark it again. This will really help me when it comes time to glue these on. Be able to line them up with my pencil marks. Turn it a corner turn and do one more. Now I've got my Bristol board bands. Paint a little yellow glue on the back. Start right here. Wind that around, lining it up with my pencil marks, just like so. Clamp that with my fingers for a second or two. For the next one, I want to come about 1, 2, 3 boards over and start it right there. You want to stagger where the joints are. For the next one up, same thing again. I want to stagger it over to the right by 3 boards. Wrap it around. Lining it up with my pencil marks that I made before. On these tanks, they always have the bands closer together down towards the bottom. See, like that. And the last one. Start right there, I think. Alright. Now I just take the tank band fasteners and glue one of them over each one of these gaps where those bands meet up. And you can take and you can bend them a little. These are white metal, so you can bend them a little bit to match the curvature of the tank. And a little bit of Eileen's tacky glue on the back. Just drop those on there. Keep this thing from rolling away. Now I really want to rest up these bands. So I'm using some, these are pan pastels. Something I really haven't used a lot of before. But so far I like them quite a lot. You apply them with these little foam makeup applicators. Just kind of dabbing it on around the bands. I want these to look super rusty. Then you can take and pull the rust stains down like that. Really want to get a lot of rust on these band fasteners, hoop tighteners. More pronounced down here towards the bottom too. Take some of this brighter red oxide. Really rust that up. Kind of want this tank to look like those bands could fail at any minute. This one really looks like old rust. You know, that dark shade's real good for stains on the wood. Now we're talking. Alright, just got a clear matte spray on that. And now I can glue it to the platform. I also went ahead and weathered the platform with the pan pastels as well, so it would match. Now everything I've done so far on this are the same steps that I would follow for a line side water tank, you know, one next to the tracks. The only difference with this one is not going to have a stand under it because it's going to be sitting up on the hillside. And it's not going to have a spout for servicing locomotives, but other than that, pretty much exactly the same process. And now I've got these 4 6x6 posts that are going to support the roof. Those just go down into these pre-cut holes. And then those get tied together up on the top with a pair of 4x6s on each side. And then the roof is going to sit on top of all that. Except there's one more thing I think I need to do. Well, before I put the roof on, I just want to paint the interior of this mailing tube flat black. That way, if any of it shows from under the roof, well, it won't look like a mailing tube. It'll just look dark. Okay, well now I can glue the roof on. That's the front. Well, time to add the roofing. And this is some leftover corrugated material from when I built the Sundance Mining Company, also for the Bandit Canyon Railway. And this stuff is from Full Circle Models, Chris Bond. And I'll put a link down below if I can find it. I just need to cut this stuff to length. The nice thing, this is already painted, so I don't have to worry about it. So I'm cheating a little bit. I'm using leftover stuff. And I'm just gluing them onto the slats with some Eileen's tacky glue. The painting process is pretty straightforward. I spray it with some red oxide primer, then sponge on some different colors of acrylic paint, some grays and browns, things like that. Put a little damage on here so you can see my roof slats that I worked so hard on. This to look pretty beat up. I'll use one of these little trimmed off pieces to cap the roof. Use the pan pastels once again to really intensify that rust weathering. Like the rest of the tank, I want it to look like the roof here is not long for this world. Could collapse at any minute. I think the tank is going to sit right there, kind of semi-hanging off the edge of the cliff. But before I install it on the Bandit Canyon Railway here, I want to do a little custom bit of rock work for it to sit in. Now the whole rock making process is kind of outside the scope of this particular video. Suffice to say that I'm going to be carving this out of some polystyrene foam. Line it up. And it never hurts to add a little something extra too. All right. Well, I love the way that's coming together. Now I need to model a water pipe coming out to bring water from the tank down to the steam boiler. So I'm going to simulate the water pipe with some wire. This looks like it's about 1 millimeter. That'll work just fine. And what I want is for this to come out from underneath the tank and then just sort of disappear underground, where presumably it'll go and hook up to the boiler. Now I want to add the look of some fittings. So I've got some heat shrink tubing. I need an elbow up here. And we'll put another one about halfway down, I think. I'll just use my heat gun to shrink those up. There we go. Now I'll get a coat of that Rust-Oleum dark brown camo on here. Now that the paint is dry, come back with my pan pastels one more time. Rest this up. Might be a little bit of alkali staining on there too. Alright. Now we'll get a clear matte finish on there, and I can install it in the scene. This end goes right down into a hole in the foam. It sits just like that. And now I can go ahead and glue the tank into place right above that. Now the only question is, where does the water come from to fill the tank? Well, presumably there's a spring up here somewhere. Now I just need to make a couple of ladders so that the workers can get from the mine up here to the water tower. Fortunately, I have a ladder jig here that I've used before. Should make this pretty easy. Just putting some fresh double stick tape on here. I've got a pair of 4x4s for the upright pieces. And then for the treads, I'll be using some 2x4 stock, and I'll just cut each one of those to length and glue them on. I'll just use my little mini miter box with a stop set up here so I can cut all of these treads exactly the same length. And then I can just line the treads up with the lines here on my jig. Makes it pretty quick and easy. Nice bit of detail to add is some nail holes where these rungs are attached. Just have a small track nail in my pin vise, which I use for that. When everything's dry, just pop that off. And then I can glue this in place right there, I think. Now I just need to make a short ladder to access this hatch here. And anytime you have a leaky water tank like this, even in the desert, you're going to have some bright green weeds growing around it. These are some buffalo grass tufts from Sulfur by way of Scenic Express. There it is, a water tank for the Blackjack Mine. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the build. If it's your first time here, like, subscribe, share, and hit that notification bell so you'll see all the videos coming from Thunder Mesa Studio. You can also follow us over on Instagram at thunder.mesa and see what's happening on the Thunder Mesa Studio website at thundermesa.studio. As always, if you really enjoy what we're doing here at the channel and would like to show your support, you can do what these fine folks did and go over to patreon.com/thundermesa and show your support there. Until next time, keep moving forward, my friends. Adios for now.